Hi guys, TotallyDubbed here, and today I'm doing a video review on the Samsung HW-Q70R. Now this soundbar comes in at around £800, which is a slight of kind of a weird sort of pricing that it comes at, simply because it sits below the HW-N850, which is the model before it, and also sits above the HW-N650, which is a model under it. In some ways, some could see this as a mix between the N850 and the N650 and mixed into one, and it gives you the Q70R. Now, in terms of the other soundbars you should consider, I'll link them down in the description below. Be sure to check them out. To me, the one that I would be really comparing it to was the HW-N850, and that's simply because the N850 can be currently found for only £100 more. I say only £100, that isn't much in the grand scheme of things. The N650 could be compared to it as well, however that doesn't have Dolby Atmos or DTS support, unlike the Q70R, which does. So without further ado, let's get into this review. So first of all, let's talk about the remote, which hasn't changed whatsoever, but still, if you're coming to a Q70R review, you'll want to know what remote you get. Well, it has two AA batteries, it's got a nice sleek design, and in terms of controls, as far as they go, you've got Bluetooth pairing, play, pause, and that works with Bluetooth mode. You've got EQ settings, which you can go through, and sound modes as well, which I'll show you in just a bit. And you've got little rockers for both the volume and the woofer, because yes, it comes with a brand new subwoofer. Now in terms of those sound modes that I talked about just earlier, there's four to choose from: standard, surround, game, and adaptive sound. Personally, I chose myself choosing adaptive sound, and yes, if you have a Samsung TV, you'll see it visualized on there. But if you don't have a Samsung TV, you can easily see it through this little LCD display. This will also show you volume information and inputs, and also allow you to customize, let's say, the treble and the bass and what have you. If you were to lose the remote for some reason, then you've got four buttons, physical buttons on the right hand side: volume up and down, input, and a power button. Now, talking quickly about the aesthetics of the actual soundbar itself, it's got a pretty sleek look. It's definitely a lot smaller than the HW-N850 and 950 before it, but yet the subwoofer is pretty much the same size and has a slightly different design. As I mentioned before, Samsung have kind of redesigned the design of it, but in terms of raw specs, it seems to be hitting the same sort of specifications as its predecessors. So the soundbar itself looks nice, and I still quite like the fact that it's got a grilled type of look to it, and just like the HW-N650 before it, it has a slightly triangular shaped design around the sides. Now in terms of connectivity, you can connect this over Wi-Fi 2.4 or 5 GHz, and that's to say if you've got the right TV or the right connection, or via the Smart Things app on your smartphone, or you've got Bluetooth as well, again useful for smartphone pairing, or again if you really wanted to connect it up to your TV. Not suggested over Bluetooth because it only supports the SBC codec, therefore you're not going to get the best high resolution sound via Bluetooth, so do bear that in mind. But for wired connectivity, you've got HDMI and optical inputs with HDMI out via TV ARC output. Unfortunately, you're limited to those sorts of connectivities only. I would have liked more HDMI inputs, but suffice to say, it's not surprising to see this on a more recent Samsung soundbar. There's also a DC power input, which is slightly different from the older variant, where it had an 8-pin connector. Now the 8-pin connector goes with the subwoofer. So just bear that in mind in terms of differences between the two models. So now, build quality aside, let's talk about the codec support and the other things before jumping into the sound quality, because it's pretty important to know what you're actually buying, especially over the N650, that's a lot cheaper. So first of all, in terms of raw output, it has around 330 watts, at least is quoted by the Samsung's website. It runs a 3.1.2 channel sort of array. It has 7 speakers that are built in, and has a frequency range between 35 Hz and 20 kHz. So a pretty wide spectrum, but you're not going to get the full extension in the low end response. In other words, you're not going to get 20 Hz rumble. Now in terms of codec support when it's connected to TV, what you're going to be interested to know is this has Dolby Atmos, Dolby Digital Plus as well, Dolby Digital 5.1, DTS-X support, and DTS 5.1 channel as well. So it's got all the things that you'd want if you're watching a blockbuster film. I had transformers that I was using for Dolby Atmos, and it came through very well and actually responded straight away at receiving that source. However, in comparison to the HW-N850, this doesn't have sideward firing speakers, and due to its lower profile design, doesn't have a sort of wider type of sound. And without getting too much into it, I'm going to let you hear a sort of short little sound demo of the soundbar and then comment on that myself. And I'm going to flick through the different sound modes, so adaptive, standard, surround, gain, and back to adaptive. So now, yes, you're back with me, and I had to do copyright-free music in order to avoid my video getting flagged and blocked worldwide. Let's talk about the sound quality traits. Now, having heard the N650, the N850, the N950, and even the all-in-one soundbars like MS650 and MS750, so yes, I've heard a lot of Samsung soundbars, I can tell you that the Q70R sits exactly how I said in terms of the beginning of the review, that this sits in between the N650 and the N850. It kind of fills that sort of gap of, I want the N650 sound, but I just want that Dolby Atmos and DTSX support, which in this respect, the Q70R does the job perfectly well. However, in terms of sound quality goes, that doesn't justify an £800 price tag. It's really expensive, especially when you compare it to the N850, which far surpasses it in the mid-range, the instrument separation, and the overall sort of spaciousness you get with the added drivers. With the 7 drivers of the Q70R, kind of limit the overall sound presentation that you get with this soundbar versus the HW-N850, which has more drivers and just sounds a lot fuller. So let me kind of break it down per frequency group. First of all, in terms of the bass, it hasn't changed from the old model. You still get the same sort of subwoofer, which, you know, really other than the sort of design hasn't changed in terms of frequency response. You're still getting around 35 Hz of extension, but that does mean it does cut off on the low end rumble, so you're not going to get that really deep bass, cinema-like experience there. The mid bass has got plenty of quantity, and it can be adjusted by the EQ settings, and plenty of quality, which is the thing that I normally look for when it comes to audio products. So it's very much impressive to see a good sort of cohesion between the sub bass and mid bass response. However, the mid range over here is where it really kind of suffers from those missing drivers and kind of that sort of feeling that, oh, I really want to be involved, and I feel involved of what I am watching and listening. Here, the Q70R sounds a little bit more recessed over the HW-N850. It feels just a little less forward sounding in terms of the vocals. The upper mids, again, are a little bit affected, only in the slightest, but again, very slightly affected in the upper mids. The highs, on the other hand, have a good extension and still have that sort of presence that you would expect from a soundbar that reaches the 20 kilohertz region. And I know that's just specs, but yes, it does reach that via a sound frequency sort of test. So, you know, the 20 hertz killer range, you know, you're going to get that extension, but that sparkle isn't really brought in and kind of, you know, mixed in really well with that soundstage. The soundstage of this, despite having Dolby Atmos and DTSX support, sounds a little bit more closed versus the N850. Don't get me wrong, you're still going to get that sort of feeling of, oh, where did that helicopter come from? Where did the cavalry run from left and right? That sort of experience you still get because you've still got that Dolby Atmos experience. You've got forward firing and upward firing speakers, which, you know, combine to bring a cool experience. But over the HW-N850, with the sideward firing drivers as well and more drivers at the front as well, you just get a much better sort of soundstage. So Instrument separation on HW-850 is a lot better. The width and depth, purely because of that sound speaker sound setup that I just mentioned, is again a lot better on the N850 over the Q70R. And just overall, in terms of my experience when I was watching a film, I just felt the N850 really made me feel like, wow, this is awesome to listen to. With the Q70R, I was like, okay, it's good. Don't get me wrong, but had I spent £800 on this and not spent £900 on the N850, I'd be very, very bitterly disappointed for not having to saved up an extra £100 to get the N850. So that's pretty much it. I mean, the Q70R sits in between the models that I said before. Is it worth purchasing? Well, personally, I can't see myself recommending it, simply because I feel like the N850 would be just a lot better shout for £100 extra. And if you're really strapped for cash and ultimately you don't care about DTSX or Dolby Atmos support, then you can save yourself a ton of money and get the HW-N650 instead, which has the acoustic beam technology, which in other words somewhat replicates Dolby Atmos but doesn't accept the Dolby Atmos sort of input. So it's a bit of a rock and hard place. If you want Dolby Atmos and DTSX support, don't skimp out, get the HW-N850, it's going to give you a far better experience and you won't regret the decision. That extra £100 will go an absolutely long way. Trust me, from a HW-N850 owner, I would highly suggest you invest that extra £100 on that Samsung soundbar. Alternatively, there are Sony and Onkyo soundbars to choose from, or systems shall I say, to choose from as well. So bear in mind there's competitors as well, not just Samsung soundbars. And if you really don't care about Dolby Atmos, DTSX support, as I said before, and you just want something that sounds good but don't care about codec support, save yourself a lot of money and get the HW-N650 instead before it sells out and before it becomes discontinued. So there we go, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed this review. It's been as honest as possible and independent and unbiased and unpaid. I just do this for fun. Hopefully you appreciate that as well. If you've got any comments, any sort of questions whatsoever, ask me down in the comments below. I always read every single comment. I'll try and answer it as best as possible. And if you enjoyed this content, like, comment, subscribe. Always helps the channel grow. I can't stress that enough. Alright guys, I've been Totally Dubbed. Take care and bye-bye.